Okay, so we're going to look at rotations in the coordinate plane today. And we've talked about rotations before. We've talked about using degrees to describe rotations. What we're going to look at are rotations that are centered on the origin. So if we're looking at number 1, the origin is right here where the x and y axis meet. And you could rotate these shapes from other points, but in the coordinate plane, usually we focus on things that rotate around the origin. So our directions say we're going to write a rule to describe each transformation. Basically, these are all rotations. What they want to know is how many degrees was it rotated. And there's a couple of ways that you can do each one of these, because you could do a clockwise rotation or a counterclockwise rotation. So I'm going to try to attack all of this. The first thing you want to do on each one of these is identify which picture is the pre-image and which is the image. So those are some terms we looked at a little bit before Christmas. It's been a while. So we're going to mark these on the picture. The one that doesn't have the primes, it just is H and D and Z, just random letters, we call this the pre-image. And this is the before image, before you moved it. This is the original. So you should be writing this on your notes. Down here is after we've done the rotation. It has the little primes on each of the numbers, and they call this the image, which is the after. So I don't know why it's pre-image and image and why they didn't do like pre and post. I'm not in control of these things. Somebody else decided that. But basically, you just want to figure out which one's first and which one's like after the rotation has happened. All right, so what we're going to use patty paper for. We're going to put patty paper over this picture. You can see through it pretty well. It's just tracing paper, more or less. If you want to conserve, you could actually get 4 of these on one, and we can cut it. So I'm just going to put mine sort of on the corner here. And what we're going to do is we're going to trace the x and y axis somewhat carefully. I'm actually going to put the y at the top so I know which part of this is the top of my picture. And I'll put the x over here so I know where I started. And I'm going to trace the pre-image. I don't necessarily, for this, need to put the letters on there. You can if you want to. H, Z, D, if that helps you. But I'm just going to do the original, okay? And then we're going to rotate it around the origin until it matches up with what's down here, and talk about how far that is. So what I like to do is stick my pencil on the origin. That way I will make sure I'm rotating it around the origin and we're not messing stuff up. So we trace the y-axis, we trace the x-axis, we trace the original picture, which is called the pre-image. And then you're going to stick your pencil to make sort of a pivot here on the origin, and we're going to start rotating. I'm going to rotate it clockwise to start with. Clockwise is this way. So if I rotated it 90 degrees clockwise, that would be down here. That's 90. If I go another 90, it's going to match up. So how far is that if I went 90 and 90? 180. So one way I could describe this is I could put 180 degrees clockwise. I abbreviate clockwise CW. Okay? So that's one possible answer. And you can tell it's 180 because it's basically turned it upside down. That's how we identified these before when we didn't have the graph. But let's go back to the beginning and talk about going the other direction. So you do need to know clockwise and counterclockwise. Clockwise is the way that the second hand and the minute hand turn on a clock. Counterclockwise is the other way. So if I'm going counterclockwise, if I went 90 degrees, it would be over here in the second quadrant. If I go 180, it's down here. 180 is sort of a special thing because you're going to end up in the same place whether you go clockwise or counterclockwise. So 180 clockwise or 180 counterclockwise. Counterclockwise, I just put 2 C's and a W, are both correct answers. It depends on which way you're turning it. So what makes this interesting is if you get into a multiple choice test, it's possible that you could have both of these as a correct answer. If it said 90 or 270 or something else, though, then you would know that that's wrong. But realize that 180 doesn't matter if I go this way or this way. You're just turning it upside down either way. Okay, so that is number 1. All right, let's go ahead and look at number 2. So I'm just going to use the next corner of my patty paper over here. And again, you want to trace the y-axis and actually trace the y so you know where up and down is. And trace the x. And I guess I haven't identified which is the pre-image and the image, but we can do that really quick. Which one is the original? How can I tell?
The bottom one.
The bottom one is the original, and how do we know that?
Because
it doesn't have the primes. So I'm just going to trace this. And for figuring out the rotation, it's not going to be super important that I get all the letters. It will be later when we're doing our own, but for this it's not a big deal. And we're going to put our pencil right here on the pivot, and I've got to figure out how far we're going to rotate it. So basically you're always going to land on the axes. If I do it a quarter turn, that's 90 degrees, and that would land it over here. And it's interesting because it's actually in a couple of different quadrants. So that's 90, and I'm going, which way am I going? I'm going counterclockwise. And then if I keep going that same direction, another 90, it does match up. So this could be 180 degrees clockwise or 180 degrees counterclockwise. And one other piece of information we should put on there, I should actually write that it's a rotation 180 degrees clockwise about the origin. If I rotated about point R or point L, you would get a very different picture. So we're supposed to, so this is a possible complete answer right here. I could say it's a rotation 180 degrees clockwise about the origin, and that tells me that we were turning it around the origin, that I went clockwise. It has all of the information we need. And for this, it could be clockwise or counterclockwise. It's 180, so it ends up in the same place. Okay, they're not all 180s though. So let's take a look at some of the others. All right, so on number 3, I'm just going to use another corner of my patty paper. Like I said, you can do 4 of these on one sheet so we're not wasting paper. And we're going to trace the y-axis and put the y at the top so we know where the top of our graph is. And trace the x. And then which one of these triangles is the original? Which one is the pre-image?
The bottom one.
The bottom one, good, because it doesn't have the primes. So that's the one I'm going to trace is the original. Now, there are 2 ways I could rotate this to get it here. Which one is going to be the most direct, the fastest? Going clockwise or counterclockwise? What do you think? Clockwise. If I go clockwise just 90 degrees, it matches up. So that's the most likely answer you would see if this was multiple choice would be, I would say it is a rotation 90 degrees clockwise about the origin. And I know it's really like irritating to write all of that down, but that gives us all of the information. When we get to the end of this unit, you're going to have to tell me if it's a rotation or a reflection or a translation, so you have to figure that out first. So that's why that word has to be there. The 90 degrees tells me how far to turn it. And then we tell me that it's clockwise, because if I did 90 degrees counterclockwise, that would end up over here, which is not what we want. So we have to make sure we're going the right direction, clockwise, and then we turned about the origin. So let's talk about the other possible answer. What if we went counterclockwise? So if I went counterclockwise, I have to go a whole lot further. So this would be 90, would land it over here. 180's up here. And then if I go another 90 degrees, that's 270 to get it over here. So we could also do 270 counterclockwise. And I'm not going to write the whole thing out with rotation and origin, but I want you to know that would end you up in the same place. It's just a bigger turn. Does that make sense? Okay, so both of those are correct answers. What I want you guys to do on the homework is tell me which one is faster. That's what's most likely to be on my answer key.
So that's the only one.
It's not wrong if you do the other one, but you can just do this one. I feel like that one's the one that's going to make the most sense. Okay, so let's take a look at number 4. I don't want to go too fast, but it does speed up a little bit once you kind of figure out what's happening. Okay, so here's the y-axis. Trace the x-axis. That just sort of lets us know what direction we started. And then which triangle is the original pre-image? The bottom one, because it doesn't have the primes. Okay, so what do you think? Clockwise or counterclockwise is the fastest?
Counterclockwise.
Okay, counterclockwise would be this way, and I agree. It's like going backwards from the way that the clock goes. And then how far is that? It's just 90. Basically, I only moved it over one quadrant. So this would say that it is a rotation, 90 degrees, counterclockwise, about the origin. And then you could also do 270 clockwise. It would just take you a little bit longer to get there. Okay? So I've used up my first piece of patty paper. I'm going to set that aside and grab a new piece to do the next 2. So down here on number 5, I would erase this, but the patty paper, because it's got that waxy coating, doesn't erase very well. But if you go to the corners, you can fit quite a bit on one piece and not waste much. Okay, so this is my y-axis. I'm going to trace my x-axis. And then which one of these is the pre-image?
The topish one.
The topish one, I agree. The kind of left top one. This one over here doesn't have the primes on the letters. And then we put our pencil on the origin. So we're doing all of these about the origin. And what do you think? Clockwise or counterclockwise would be the fastest? Counterclockwise. So I'm going to do it a quarter turn. So that's just 90 degrees counterclockwise. So we have to say it's a rotation, 90 degrees counterclockwise about the origin. You can actually do rotations around any point, but most of the time they're going to use the origin just because it's going to be the easiest for you to line up and actually do. We're going to leave number 6 as a practice problem in a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and skip to the second page of notes. So right here on number 6, I'm just going to put practice problem. If you already did it, then you'll just be ahead in a few minutes. So I'm going to go over to number 7 on the next page. So this is different. They're only giving us the pre-image, and then we're going to do the image. So I'll show you what we can do with our patty paper. Our patty paper is a little square. We're going to be actually attaching these to the paper when we're done, which is different than what we did on the other page. So I'm going to fold this into quarters and actually cut it up. So I'm going to fold it this way and fold it this way just to make sure that they're going to be about the right size. And then I'm going to cut this into 4 little patty papers just so that we're not using tons of paper. You don't have to cut exactly on the lines. I'm really bad at cutting. And I tore mine a little bit, but it'll still work. So we're just cutting it into 4 pieces. If you want to just eyeball it, it's fine. If I try to do that, bad things happen. All right, so I've got a little piece of patty paper, and now I can focus on what I need to do with it. And we're actually going to use Scotch tape to attach these, so I'm going to pass that out real quick. There's Scotch tape in you guys' basket already. There's one. Here, I can do another one. Okay. So, what we're going to do first is we are going to trace just like we were on the others. Okay? So we're going to trace the y-axis up here and the x-axis here. And we're going to trace the pre-image, and we do need to label the letters this time because we're going to actually be writing in the primes. So I have U here, D here, and M there. We want to make sure that we have those points correct. And then we're going to see what we have to do. So it says we're going to do a rotation 90 degrees counterclockwise about the origin. So 90 degrees is just going over one quadrant. Counterclockwise would be this way. It's like backwards from the way a clock goes. And all we're going to do is line that back up with the axes and tape it down. Yes, you got to cut it because that's why I gave those directions. And just a quick little piece of tape on the top and bottom will secure that. Don't tape it on just one side, they will peel off. But this is just the fastest way to do it. And I'll let you guys know when you are doing CMAS in the spring, you will have it on your iPads, even if you don't have tracing paper, because your iPads light up. Regular paper you can usually trace through, and it makes it really easy. I think we can also give you patty paper. It's just, say this is our scratch paper, but this is just an easy way to do it. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and start tracing on number 8. So on number 8, I am going to trace the y-axis and the x-axis. I'm going to write the x and y so I know which way I started. Go ahead and trace this quadrilateral, this four-sided funny-looking thing, and trace the letters. Oh, you know what we forgot to do on the last one? We traced the letters. We forgot to put the primes. So let's go back and do that really quick. M prime, D prime, U prime. So we trace these. Let's go ahead and just put the primes on it. So we trace it, and on your patty paper, you can go ahead and put in the primes, the little evil twins. And then we'll see, it says rotation 180 degrees about the origin. They don't say clockwise or counterclockwise. Why do you think that is? Because it's the same, it doesn't matter. So you get to pick your favorite direction. I'm going to go clockwise just because we've done a lot of counterclockwise. So this would be 90 degrees. And then 180 is when you've turned it upside down. And we've got all the primes on there. So all we have to do now is tape it. So just make sure your origin and your axes are lined up. Tape the top and the bottom. Voila! It's all done. Are you trying to do all of those right now? You need to pay attention. Like, I know this is probably easy for you, but it'll be okay. We're almost done. You don't have to have that all done in one day. Like, it's not my expectation.
Oh, okay.
I'm not like, show up to class tomorrow or die if you don't have this done. Like, it's okay. All right, so let's look at number 9. Rotation 90 degrees counterclockwise about the origin. So first thing we do is just trace everything. Hopefully this will become somewhat automatic. So there's Y at the top, and X over here. And then we'll trace the pre-image down here. And when you trace the letters, go ahead and just put the primes on there, then we won't forget. Because we are making their twin. So it wants us to go 90 degrees counterclockwise. So I put my pencil on the origin just so I know that's where I'm rotating from. And we turn it a quarter turn like that and tape it down. This isn't too bad, right? I like doing these. I love patty paper.
It just takes a lot of effort.
It really doesn't. So there is another way to do this where you learn a rule and you write down all the coordinates and then you change the coordinates and regraph it. This is the easy way, I promise. This is the easy way. Okay, so let's go over to number 10. So we're going to do a rotation 90 degrees counterclockwise about the origin. So we're going to trace the y-axis and the x-axis, and we're going to trace the triangle and the letters, and we'll put primes on them. So H prime, F prime, P prime. And then it says 90 degrees counterclockwise again. So we're going opposite of the clock. So we just go a quarter turn to this second quadrant and tape it down. Oops. Okay, so on number 11 and 12, we actually get to do some clockwise.
Yay!
Are you guys ready? Am I going too fast?
Let's do 20,000 please.
I like rotations. I think they're my favorite.
Let's just do this over here.
We started doing stuff before Christmas with transformations, and we're just kind of finishing it up. And then we're going to move on to some scientific notation and exponents and other stuff that's coming up. All right, so we're going to trace the original picture, and then don't forget to put primes because this is a copy. And then we just have to make sure we're reading carefully. It says rotation 90 degrees clockwise. So you just have to make sure that you're turning it that way. So clockwise would be down here, the direction that the clock goes. And glue it, I'm sorry, not glue it, tape it down. And then number 12 we will leave as a practice problem.